Welcome back to our Teachers Return to Work webinar for INTO and TUI members, in association of course with Core Market. I'm Brent Pope. I'd have to say I didn't think we'd be back here with these webinars because this has gone on seemingly for ages, but I'm delighted to be joined for the webinar by Fiona Foreman, former teacher herself and a positive psychology practitioner, and we'll get to what that means shortly. And of course, my old friend, the Prof. Jim Lucey, clinical professor of psychiatry at Trinity College Dublin and consultant psychiatrist at St Patrick's University Hospital in Dublin. So you're both very welcome. I'll start with you, Fiona, because you were telling me you were practicing teaching up until December. You've now gone into the psychology side of that. You're working with a number of teachers now. I think, you know, you'd have to be under a rock somewhere if you didn't see the problems that are going to rise from the keeping the schools open and the teachers' return to work protocol. So what do you see as the real worries or anxieties for teachers out there?
Yeah, thanks, Brent. I'm delighted to be here. I think teachers are facing so much now. It's hard to even start to categorise the different stresses they're feeling since March, when straight away they had very little time to prepare for that online environment of teaching. They were thrown into that with very little preparation. So we've had months of that. Then they had months of uncertainty over the summer as to whether the schools would open, and a huge amount of work being done within the school community there as well. A lot of principals not really getting a break at all over the summer in terms of the physical work needing to be done, and then of course going back to school in such an uncertain time. And I think the biggest thing teachers are feeling at the moment from the work I'm doing with them is a feeling of being overwhelmed, feeling of really being overwhelmed with everything coming at them and the amount of uncertainty. And I know you'll say that, Jim, dealing with uncertainty is just so difficult.
Tell me, Fiona, are they overwhelmed with the COVID, or are they overwhelmed with the workload and everything that comes with being a teacher?
I think it's a mixture, because having taught for over 30 years and only finishing up there at Christmas, I would always say teaching is a demanding job at the best of times. It's a great job, a very rewarding job, but a very demanding job at the best of times, and now it's actually the worst of times. So, you know, this is my first September not to have gone back in the classroom, but to see the added demands, and really then none of the other demands taken away is another thing for teachers. Still those, and then they have the added, and a big sense of responsibility. I'm hearing that from teachers, that teachers are now carrying the physical health of the students. That's massive. And as we said, we know now teachers are frontline, and it's great that we've had that acknowledgement that teachers are frontline. But as a friend of mine said to me, we never signed up to be frontline. You know,
that's a really good point.
We didn't sign up for this. Obviously, we're doing it and we have to do it. But it's slightly different when it's not something that you were prepared for. It's not something you signed up for, and now you find yourself in that situation.
Yeah, because we were just talking with Jim about it's like being drafted.
Yes.
You know, when you don't really, you know you should, but you don't really feel that way. You don't really,
It's being a soldier, but you're being called up. You didn't sign up. You didn't sign up for this battle, and it's a different form of contest when you're being told you're a hero. You know that not all heroes have capes. Some are in the classroom.
Yes.
And you're saying, well, no, I'm not signed up to be a hero. I'm a human being.
Didn't sign up for this.
Happy staying at home, and you know.
Well, I think I have a right to choose whether I'm going to be a hero here or not, and I don't really have that choice now.
Yes.
I think there's a real tension and anxiety in people's heads in the classroom and in other places, but particularly now in the classroom because of their special circumstance, between a mismatch between what the expectations are and what people's own, if you like, sign up is. And when you ever get that tension, you get pain. You get a real distress then.
And a feeling of being unsafe as well. You know, as you know yourself, like safety is such a primary requirement for our well-being. A feeling of safety psychologically and physically. And that's kind of removed now because teachers, I think that survey showed, over nearly 90% of them feeling that they might bring the virus home. So that's a feeling of actually not being safe. And I mean, that is so detrimental to manage.
How then did they construct a positive day teaching with the worries in the back of their mind about, you know, is some kid coughing or sniffing in the back of the class? Have they had a case the day before? I mean, how do you, How do you teach to the best of your ability with all those worries going on the back of your mind? Is, am I taking it back to an elderly parent or a family or a husband or, you know, like...
Well, indeed, that was one of the big worries that came out of the survey, the fear that a teacher will bring it back to their home, because every teacher has a family, has a home, has somebody else they're caring for, somebody else with special needs.
How do you juggle that?
Well, I think what we're talking about today is that task, because this is really challenging life. This is not normal. So one of the things I would say is please stop calling it the new normal.
Yeah.
This is not a normal.
No.
And we can look forward to a normal, because actually human beings will get back to living, loving and working again. And I really want that positive reality to come. I don't know how long this siege will last. We're under a siege. Pandemics have happened before. This is exceptional. I see it as the beginning of the 21st century. This is the first great dynamic event, change event of society. So, whoa, first thing, if you're feeling really desperate, that's okay, because we all are. And that's, I think that's a really important thing. I think we all need to take deep breaths, to chill, to sit and say, I'm feeling this way, and you know what? That's the right response.
Yeah, so true.
It's not actually an abnormal response.
And there's so many mixed reactions from teachers too, because I think most teachers were actually really happy to go back to school. They didn't like the online learning no more than the children or the parents did.
But and different circumstances now, though.
And different circumstances, and the camaraderie in schools and the connection, the sense of connection people get, and they love being back with the kids. So they're balancing that with the fear and the anxiety, which is draining too. And I have to say, just to point out, monumental work being done in schools. I want to say that, to acknowledge that. The effort, incredible effort being done by the whole school community.
And of course, you signed up to be in that school. You want. I mean, I work in a college environment and in a hospital environment, collective places. The missing of them is terrible. It's visceral.
Which affects people's mental health anyway.
Oh, well, absolutely, because we're social. So what I would like to say is you could spend a good time listing all the ways in which we're distressed. And I think it would be useful. Overwhelmed, you said, Fiona. Fearful, Brent, bringing it to other people. Anxious, what's to become out of control. In many ways, it might be a good exercise to list them. Get out a blank piece of paper.
Acknowledge them.
Acknowledge them. Have an open mind, list them. If you move to the right column, having put them all down on a page, they're all one thing, actually. They're all pain. They give you a headache. At very least, they give you a headache, or they give you, pain somewhere. Okay. And I think we need to talk about pain, because pain is something that actually we might need to understand how to manage, how to cope with, how to overcome. It's very real now. Everybody really is in pain. The lawyers talk about being under subpoena, under pain. We've put people in lockdown. It's a subpoena. We're putting people under pain. How do we deal with pain?
How do you deal with it?
Well, the first thing is there is no way of avoiding this pain. It is real. I think that's the first thing.
Yeah, true. And how much we can't control, that's a big issue. I know that's a kind of a cliche, control what you can. And for schools, I'm seeing momentous work going on in schools. I mean, when you think of teacher wellbeing, we're here to talk about teacher wellbeing. It is very much a shared responsibility. We have a personal element of it. We have interpersonal, so we're responsible for each other's, and then organisational, and then systems. But I suppose teachers do feel a little bit under-supported at systems level. We can acknowledge that. But I think all the more reason now for us to look and be very militant. I say to teachers, be militant about the personal, the interpersonal and the organisational. Look at what you can do for yourself.
But I think you make a good point about supporting within the unions, within their own network, because you look at that, what, 87% or 90% of teachers was scared to bring the virus back home. Now, I doubt that 90% of teachers would admit to that. So there's an element to it. How do you juggle, Fiona? How do you juggle teachers that actually are feeling guilty because they're not as gun ho as other teachers to go back? Again they looking and saying, I don't want this. And not being put down by other people that do want it. how do they deal with that sort of guilt thinking, okay,
Yeah.
I'm not actually mad keen about
Yeah.
going back to teach my class. I know I should be like
Yeah.
John or Sarah
Yeah.
is, but I'm not. And
And I think Jim's point there is that all feelings are okay.
They're
That's
all
the
okay.
message
Exactly.
as a teacher that we give to
Yeah.
the kids.
I think
doesn't
that's-
matter how you
all
feel,
feelings
negative,
are
positive,
okay.
they're okay.
I
And
think
it's how we deal with the
I think
feelings.
that's right. I think
Yeah.
I think now you've mentioned another one. There's guilt.
Yeah, there's
there's
guilt, yeah.
there's COVID shaming. There's non-wanting to be hero
Yeah.
shaming. Whatever you
Yeah.
call
Not
it.
everybody wants to be heroes.
Well, I mean, or should be. I
Yeah.
mean, we talked about the relationships in school and the levels of them. And of course, there's the adult pupil relationship. There's the adult teacher-teacher relationship. There's the teacher-teacher to management relationships. Each of those is impacted in a different way by COVID.
Yes. Oh, massive impacts.
Massive. I think you're right about being able to say, I mean, militancy is a good word. I think it's important that people say, well, I've got this column here of these issues, and I think I can acknowledge them to myself and functionally communicate them to others and take steps, because no one is being asked or should be asked to jeoprize themselves.
Yes, that's so true.
I think it's important that teachers know
Yeah.
that whatever you're asked to do, health and safety, as they used to say over in the UK when I was there, isn't a reason to put yourself at risk.
True. And our health and safety have to be a priority.
Absolutely.
And we have to set the boundaries. And I think teaching is one of those jobs where it's hard to set the boundaries because it's an all-consuming job at the best of times.
Yeah.
But I do say to teachers, if you don't set the boundaries yourself, nobody will set them for you. And some teachers find that out too late because burnout happens.
Burnout
if you
can
don't set the boundaries. And now you have to say, and I mean, I do say to teachers, I read a great phrase somewhere, now is not the time to expect more of ourselves,
No.
it's the time to expect less of ourselves.
Well,
so expect
absolutely.
less of yourself.
So the individual teacher needs to, that lesson one,
Yes.
set the boundaries for
Set the
themselves.
boundaries for
Not
yourself.
the basis of the school, not the basis of the
Yes.
principal, the boundaries,
Yes.
their own boundaries of what
Yes.
they
I think
accept.
so. And ask, we saw that survey,
Yeah.
it's a very high toll. Sometimes you have to say
It's
to yourself,
incredibly high toll, and that's
this
what I
is
said
too
to you.
high a toll, and what can I let go of? Do I just have to leave early most days, when last year I wouldn't have left early and I would have been doing extra work, or I would have been working on different projects with the kids? Maybe it's now time to say, no, what, you know what? And teachers are very diligent and very conscientious in general. So it's hard then to let go of that aspect of your identity
But here's the
and
thing.
say, I'm just kind of doing kind of a medium enough job to protect myself.
But
It is hard.
I think that a lot of teachers, if they were told, do less,
Do less.
lower your expectations, lower the demands on yourself, they'll feel guilty about that.
Yeah, true.
But what we're saying is, no, that's a good thing
That's
to
a
do.
good thing. And that's the message they need
It's
to
a
hear.
good. Why is it? How can it be a good thing
Yeah.
to do less and lower your expectations?
Yeah.
After all, these
Yeah.
are challenging environments.
And
they're
the
ambitious,
responsibility.
They're responsible.
Yeah.
The reason is this pain business. If you look at that left column there, all of those things are actually harmful, and they all set agendas for you, for us, in circumstances of stress, which we shouldn't rise to.
Yeah, it's good.
They're
yeah.
all toxic agendas.
Yes, very
So
good.
now, if my agenda, if my expectations are being driven by my pain,
Yes.
oh no, I shouldn't rise to that.
Yeah,
Actually,
that's very
oh
good.
no, that's actually not the right voice. I should listen. Say, whoa, hold a minute. On the right-hand column, there's my balm, my soothe,
Yeah.
my ointment,
My self-care.
my self-care. What is in that column? And
Yes.
people will find, I've got nothing in that column.
True.
What have I done?
Yeah.
And that's
Self-awareness
that's where your
important.
expectations can change.
Yes.
I really like the idea of lowering your expectations when they're driven by the pain,
Yes.
because you'll actually increase your output when it's
That's
driven by the
so
pain.
true.
And from a teaching perspective, Fiona, how do you, like I'm coming from a sporting perspective and also a person that grew up around animals, don't show your fear, in a sense, because people
Yeah.
see through. How do teachers get by if they've got this innate fear, whatever,
Yeah.
90% of them do?
Yes.
How do they stop that being portrayed to
Yeah.
the people
And
they're
that's-
teaching?
And that's emotional regulation. And again, I suppose
Yeah.
for years we've been doing that with the children. And just to point out as well, in terms of the output being higher, I just wanted to take you up on that point, Jim, because it's so interesting for teachers to be aware. There's such a strong link between teacher well-being and pupil well-being.
Yeah.
By looking after your own well-being, you're actually,
Yeah.
by doing less, you're actually going to have a better impact. Because you're going to be replenished, you're going to be restored. It actually pays
do
off.
less of the pain column.
Yes.
Actually, is
Yeah.
far more good. So
Yes.
I mean, look, what do the comedians say? 90% is about showing up. Okay,
yes,
and we're very cross with presenteeism. You're just showing up.
Just should be.
But I mean, it's really brave to get up and show up.
Yeah.
Being there, being present, being mindful in the moment.
Yes.
The pain idea, I think, is worth exploring as well, because a lot of the anxiety, the overwhelmness, the guilt, all that, is really about future worry.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's what we mean by anxiety. It's oh my God, what's going to happen in the future?
In the future.
Okay. Yeah. And then there's this other worry that it's pre-COVID. We all have it. And I call it rear worry. Okay? That's oh my God, what happened in the past? What have I got already in my bag? And that's depression really, but it's the kind of tow truck on your car. It's pulling you back. So now you've got this snowplow in front with the future worry, and you've got a truck behind you're pulling, okay?
Yes. Yeah.
And it's just, so sometimes it's
Exhausting.
better pull in by a lay-by
Yeah.
and detach these two apparatus.
Yes.
And now just be somewhere.
In the present,
The
yeah.
Easier
past.
said
Present
than done,
moment,
though.
easier said than done.
Easier said than done.
It's the
Yeah.
common
How?
title in every self-help book you ever read, Live in the Now. And I say to people, who actually does it? Because the now, in a sense, is gone now. But just a couple of things coming you back to support. There's a couple of questions. And feel free, everybody that's out there in kind of the media land, to send in questions if you want to join the discussion. A couple of things here about one that resonates. I find myself staying in the room at breaks and at lunch, as our staff room can only accommodate limited persons and teaching has become a lonely place.
Yeah.
And there's also another one here along the same line. I'm struggling as the people I used to talk to in the staff room are no longer available with staggered lunches, and this is affecting my ability to relax and deflate. So how do we support the teachers from within and yet...
Yes. I've seen that, and I mean that's a big part. Even the school where I used to work, I wanted to go in and say chat to them, and obviously I can't even go in. So there's so many restrictions in terms of groups mixing. But what I would say to teachers is that when we can't have that physical support, we just have to be really, really strong on the emotional connection. That we can still sustain that emotional connection to each other. Things like, I'm seeing wellbeing committees being set up in schools, staff wellbeing committees, which is lovely. Wellbeing WhatsApp groups for just sharing funny news. Random Acts of Kindness Week in a school I was talking to last week, where everybody just, and again they're small things, but small gestures just keep that sense of connection.
No, that's great, because the next question leads to that, is what are some of the practical things? What are some of the practical things we can do to promote staff well-being?
Yeah, and a wellbeing committee is a good idea, and to get ideas from staff, even coming in a little bit earlier. A friend of mine was saying she comes in a little bit earlier and has a social distance coffee.
What do they do, Jim? Lonely at lunchtime? They're by themselves, they're sitting out in the car having a sandwich or something, no one to talk to.
I think we've got to recognise that acknowledgement, although it has to be full, is only the start of it. It's a very good start, because anybody who's worrying, feeling guilty about the way they're feeling is, needs to stop doing that. No one's blaming. But then you have to say, well, what do we do? And this is what we're asking. Here's the answer, really. It's about building culture. Now, it's not done overnight, but we know that collective support, cultural support, is how individuals survive.
Yes.
We don't actually get well for ourselves. We get well for each other, and when we get well for each other, actually we get well for each individual. So what you have is an opportunity. A school community is actually a recovery place. It could connect, it can be hopeful, it can rediscover its identity, it can find meaning, it can empower its members. And they're the 5 letters of recovery. Chime.
Yes.
The things that make things chime. So actually a leadership comes in. I know we've seen over, I suppose, the 7 months of our, I'm not going to be political here because I'm not political, but over the 7 months of our national lockdown, or even internationally, actually leadership makes a huge difference. So here's where you're the countries that have done well have had leadership that's taken the right steps, that's been science-driven, and it's been compassionate. That's where your militancy goes. Hey, I'm going to show up. I have a job to do. But let's work on building a culture that's science-driven and compassionate and connected. And that's what we're looking for.
Well, that's brilliant. I think that's brilliant advice, and I think it leads to what you were saying before. I mean, why not, I'm just throwing things out there, why not for that person that feels a bit lonely, why not a teacher's walk and talk?
Exactly.
And we
see that is happening in schools.
Yeah, going for
and
a group.
teachers
Even if you go on a
after
few laps
school,
around the field, having a bit of a
exactly.
tour, what
Yeah.
a shared problem. I've always believed a
Yes.
problem shared is a problem
Yeah.
halved.
Absolutely.
I still believe that. So,
So true.
for those people that are feeling a bit lonely, teachers out there that they can't go into the usual environment, just change that
Just
environment, change
have to
that
be
culture.
Well,
Go for a
creative, I
walk,
suppose, and find out ways to make that connection.
Yeah.
I'm hearing of a great initiative in another school where they have a check-in system where, again, senior management are acting as mentors. So,
Oh, lovely.
it's so that
and
everybody
that's right
has a
up
check-in.
your alley because
Yeah.
of the positive psychology.
So positive
work,
psychology.
which,
So everybody has a check-in person that so it mightn't just be a friend of yours, or it's actually somebody in management that you can go to, and a listening ear. That's what we need sometimes.
And then remembering, here's another practical thing. All of us have, different scopes, different levels of adaptation, particularly around social things. Many of us are shy anyway. You'll know in your group who to reach out to.
Yes. Check in on people.
Check in on someone
Yeah,
else.
check in on each other.
And make it possible to
Yes,
reach out to
yes,
each other.
yeah.
Find ways,
Yes.
using the techno, using the
Using the
modern
Zoom
media,
if you have to.
using the Zoom,
Does
making
work.
it fun.
Yeah,
Okay?
making it fun,
I mean,
yeah.
the thing I used to, and Brent knows it, I used to love to do was to take part in choirs. Okay, they're all dead now.
I know, yeah.
But now that one of the choirs I'm involved with is doing Zoom choiring,
Yeah,
and
brilliant.
I just
Yeah.
think Deirdre, who runs it, is a hero because she's bringing us
Adapted.
together and
Yes.
saying, "No, we're going to do this," and
Yeah.
we do our exercises and
Yes.
stuff.
Yeah.
And you know what?
Lovely.
It's cultural change though, because what you're saying is these are the things we value, and these things we're going to build in.
Yes.
And I
new,
like-
new
I
ways
like-
to do them.
Yeah,
And I
which is
like it.
exciting, really.
Yeah,
It's
it is.
exciting.
Yeah.
Teachers out there. I mean, I'm not a teacher. My brother was a teacher, but it's a chance for change, and it might take a while. But
yeah.
it is a time that teachers can get together and say, look, this change has to happen, and it has to
Yeah.
happen now. We have to
Yeah.
find new ways of connecting,
Yeah.
new ways of supporting.
And
so
schools
rather than
are
look at it as a
brilliant.
negative.
Brilliant at that. That's what schools do really well. And I love
brilliant.
that phrase,
Like you said, a community within a
Yes.
community.
Lovely.
Schools are just a fantastic example of that.
Well, because you see, they're used to. My family members who are teachers and friends who are, they new people come in every year.
Yeah.
There's new life.
Yes.
There's new prospects.
Yes.
And there's great adaptability certainly amongst those who are teaching in national school level or pre-secondary level.
Yeah.
They see tremendously adaptable creatures who are ready for change. It's more difficult for those who are in the adolescent phase, who, in many ways, they're developing an upstairs brain already, and it's not there yet. And it's tough on those kids because those kids had an expectation of something that
Yes.
isn't going to be there.
Yeah.
And teachers managing that is going to be hard.
It's hard.
But
Yeah.
I think that this is the biggest event in terms of infections. I know this sounds a bit dramatic, but if you think of the Black Death, okay, the world changed, Europe changed certainly, and nothing was the same again.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying it's going to be like that, for sure, but I think I think
Change.
it's better than saying we're going to get back by Christmas, which actually creates a huge tension. Let's imagine we sit. You say, does anybody live in the moment? In this moment, let's imagine being now that this was the beginning of something really big, really different, maybe even exciting.
Yeah, well, that's what, but if you can look like
Positive
exactly
change.
the people I've been talking to, just sort of in my own sort of counselling, they repeatedly come back to me and say, when will I be my old self again? I said, how about looking that you'll be a better
better.
self?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what do you mean? What do you mean? I just want
Yeah.
my old self back, even from a mental point. I say, don't look at it like that. Say, look, won't you come out of this journey as more compassionate, as
Yes.
more kind? And they said, but I never
More
thought
connected,
of it like that.
yeah. And that's
this-
post-traumatic growth, isn't it?
Post-traumatic
and
growth.
post-traumatic growth is always a possibility for all of us.
Well, this leads us on to
Yeah.
this. Is any tips on how to cope with the positive view of education, the public media, when really it's a daily struggle? Sooner or later, parents will expect results and progress. How do we manage that? Everybody's saying,
Yeah.
come on, the schools are all
Yes,
back and everything
yes.
like that. But there's going to be parents out there
Oh,
saying,
yeah.
okay, well, my
know.
son's been sitting on the sofa for the
I
last
know.
week. he's going to get
He
back
wants
in
to
and
make
get
up
the
this ground.
Yeah,
that
make up this ground. And this
well, again,
more
they're the
pressure.
unrealistic expectations. And teachers already put a lot of expectations. We
On
put them on
themselves.
ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's the starting point to let go of. And
So
then you also have to
how-
just let go
practical
of them.
tips on again, a
I
bit
think
like...
a strong message has to be sent to parents. And again, you
Yep.
talk about those columns. That's in the pain
Yeah.
column.
It's in
isn't
the pain
it?
column, isn't it? Yeah.
And it's something you can reject. I do say to teachers,
Yeah.
reject unrealistic
Yeah.
expectations. And it's hard
So you
because
set your
we tie
barriers in a
in-
sense with the expectations too, and say,
Yeah.
this is what I think I can achieve
Exactly.
in this time period.
Yes,
And
and
that's,
self-compassion is
Yeah.
so important,
Yeah.
and not to tie our sense of self-worth into our job, because
No.
teachers do that, and teachers feel. I don't know much about other professions, but you know, if you feel you're not, you know, if your children aren't progressing or are doing things, you take it on
then you're a
yourself,
failure.
and then you feel like a failure. And so to try and make that little bit of detachment, that I'm doing my best in a very difficult situation, and detach from the outcome in a way,
And how do
because
you
once you do your
I
best,
think that's
how do you
nothing
detach
else.
though?
it's hard.
Well,
it's
I think
it's a hard.
well, it's a hard one, but I think we can
Yeah.
unpack it in the short space we have here. I mean, if you go back to those letters that define what recovery means, the middle one I said was identity.
Yeah.
Once you think, I am doctor, or I am
Yes.
teacher,
Yeah.
you know, or I am rugby player, you're really stuffed.
Yeah, that's okay.
Because you're
Yeah.
not
That's-
going to
that's
be
your identity.
You're
You're not
not
going to be
going to be a
forever.
doctor.
True.
And in fact, actually,
Yeah.
you know, I always say to the medical students, we've got tons of doctors,
Yes.
but we need doctors who can play the cello.
Yeah.
Or who
Holistic.
can tell a good
Yeah.
joke, or you know, who,
Yeah.
you know, I don't really want to qualify
Yeah.
a doctor who can't, you know, kick a ball. Now it's or something.
I say person first, teacher second
Yeah.
to the teachers. Person first, teacher second. Let go of that identity, let go of those expectations,
Yeah.
whoever's putting them on you. And I know it's not easy. And then there has been criticism from the media too, which teachers take to heart because they are trying to do their best.
But this is a hopeful
It's
thing
hard.
because you can suddenly come back and say, okay, I actually am not able to do this at all.
Yeah.
I'm going to show up. And by the way, do you know, I also knit. Now imagine if you said that to your headmaster or something. What are you doing? Well, I'm really doing some really good knitting at the moment.
Yeah.
Now, they would take a time before they realize you're pulling their leg, but the joke would make a point.
Yes.
There's something more to me than this.
And this narrow,
And that's where I'm coming
yes, boundary, yeah.
from. And that's where, so now, don't define it all by the classroom.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you can flip that over.
Yeah.
That 30 minutes you have with 36, well, how many, sometimes huge classes with lots of mixed abilities, it's your cultural moment. You can define the tone of that, but you have to first of all define this inner tone. So you need to be mindful because you're
Yeah.
going to set the culture of this.
Yeah.
Somebody else, the toughest chaws in your class might make it hard for you to do that. And would have anyway, as the questioner said, Brent, it was hard enough to be a teacher before COVID. Now is a time for you to say, well, how can I set the tone of this? And it has to be a tone that works for me.
Yeah, and prioritise, that's a big one.
That's the priority.
What are the priorities now? And well-being is a priority
Yeah.
from the department, which is great. The department are saying that we can prioritise well-being in
And
schools.
look, I know there's going to be people out there saying it's all very well for those people to sit up there and talk like this. I mean, what then, I suppose somebody wants to come back to you in a minute with chime because they're obviously trying to write it down and they couldn't get past the CH or whatever. And so you might go over that again.
Yeah.
But I think what some of the questions are is, what can they actually do rather than kind of saying, oh, well, you know, this is great and look at it like this way. People find that hard. So
Yes.
is it getting out the pad
Yeah.
tonight and putting down the things that are really worrying them and what they can do about it? Is it setting about the culture of change and tone? Is it getting together with a group of teachers and say, hey, let's go for a walk, let's create a well-being club, let's do something like that. So it's really come to from teachers' talk, it's come to an actionable stage.
Yeah.
Not just thinking about it won't make it happen.
Yes.
No.
They've got to actually physically.
Well, one of the big messages I say to teachers is invest in your life outside school in
Yeah.
as much as you do.
That's a bit like you were saying with the knitting and the-
more
Yeah.
so than you do, because
Yeah.
again, the teaching, the planning is never done, the correcting is never done, the displays, it's never done. You have to accept that, and now we have the extra challenges.
What would you do? Put it this way: what would you're back teaching? You've been asked to go
If
back
I was
to
told
teach
to go
again.
back,
If you were
I'd
told to go
panic,
back,
number one.
how would you, knowing
I'd have to start walking the walk and not
Yeah,
just
that's
talk
right.
the talk.
Knowing what you know now about dealing with
yes,
teachers and the
yes,
psychological side of that, the
yes.
empowerment, the positivity, knowing all that,
yeah.
knowing that you were a teacher for how many years?
32.
Okay, knowing that,
Yeah.
that experience, how would you react going back, do you think?
The first thing I would do is, because I'm very interested in the area of self-compassion.
Yep.
So Professor Kristen Neff, I love all her work and her TED Talks. So I've learned that myself over the years, that the first thing I would do would be lower my expectations.
Okay.
And I'm not saying happy to do that, you're never happy, but I'm able to manage it a bit more now. And I would say, no more than what you were saying, Jim, that by
That's
just
lowering your
showing up
expectations of yourself
of what
and
I'm
also
going
of your pupils?
of what I'm going to get done.
Okay, what are you going to
Of
get
what
done?
I'm going to get done. And also, I would be trying to make sure that I love the phrase, focus on your energy, manage your energy, not your time. You know, so be checking in with yourself on a daily basis. That's what I did in my last few years in the classroom, where I was just checking in with myself. How do I feel? What do I need? To keep asking yourself that question instead of burnout. So do I need to actually stop now? That's enough of that lesson. Do I need to take a drink of water? Because when you go into the classroom, you go on to this level where it's so intense.
You're on the pitch,
so to
like
kind of
sporting,
decrease, decrease that intensity, checking in with yourself all the time, making that decision, when is enough, you know, and what toll is it going to take on my health, my mental health, my well-being, and that's too high a price to pay. And I found when I started to do that actually the classroom was, I actually got more done, because I took that pressure off myself. It is kind of, I don't know how to explain that.
Because it comes from the pain column, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not lowering your expectations of, if you like, worthwhile things.
Yes.
It's lowering the aberrant expectations that come from the pain column.
Yes. Yeah,
I'm
true.
not going to listen to the pain column.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, no, but they're all toxic things.
Yes.
They're in my sled or they're in my snowplow,
Yeah.
but they're not where I need
You
to
don't
be.
have to. You don't have
I
to.
don't
believe
respond to
they're
those.
only thoughts or whatever.
They're only thought.
Yeah.
I think I would absolutely amplify what Fiona is saying, what you've been saying, Brent. But I would do two things. One is I would do a sort of big idea thing, and then I would have some toolbox things. You know, because we all talk about having a kit for managing anxiety.
Yes.
The big idea thing, there's loads of them, but just one for now. Because you only take one big idea.
Yeah.
No more strife. If somebody brings you strife, if you want to bring strife, if you want to, have the row, ask yourself now, okay, the soldier's question, what I call the soldier's question, is this the ditch I want to die in? Okay?
No.
The answer is no.
Yeah.
Because then well, actually, if it isn't the ditch I want to die in, is this piece of strife worth having?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you will find it's not. So whatever it is, we know lots of things about education, about raising kids, about parenting, and about teaching, but we know one thing for sure: strife is always bad.
Yeah.
It's never good for anybody.
Yeah.
There's no winners. It's a ditch you're going to die in. So it's a big idea. Ponder it, write it down, think about whether that makes sense for you. You don't have to agree with this, but my view is I'm always wrong when I think I'm right. That's always a bad
Well, also
idea.
the thing, I take your own thing, I think it was something you said to me, a while ago, and you said, Brent, is this of any use? And I think that's always stuck with me, because when I have a history of anxiety problems and stuff like that, well known, well documented, but I always, when I go back and I say, is this of any use? Is this doing me any good worrying about this,
Yes.
or spending all this energy you were saying on worrying what may happen?
It's a big idea though, isn't it? And it's a great idea. Is it of any use? Or another way that the Harvard people put it is, what's at stake here?
Yeah.
What's
Yes.
at stake?
And what's the price?
Yeah, what's the price?
Do I want to pay
needs
that
to be at
price?
stake, what needs to be at stake is our welfare.
Yeah.
I'm a teacher,
Yes.
but I'm a human being, and what's really
Absolutely.
at stake
Yes.
is that's the big idea.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, I think we need to turn awareness into action.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of awareness, and I think it's really great. I think people like Brent and yourself take credit for moving the mental health conversation out there so that awareness has risen. But we're still really short on actions.
Yeah.
And people come back to me and say, I hear you going on and on,
Yeah,
but what do I do?
That's what I mean. That's what I was talking about before.
Yeah.
They always
Action.
wanted that. But what do I do? What do I do?
I think
Well,
connecting to people as well.
Connecting.
That connection, because
And
I
make an
sometimes
effort to
find
connect.
making an effort, and sometimes it's just talking to somebody, having a laugh with somebody in the morning. Teachers, again, that sense of camaraderie is
Well,
massive.
here's
that
one
can
for you.
keep you going.
I knew I'd get brilliant questions because they're teachers.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But I find the wearing of masks makes it difficult to emotionally connect with young kids
Yeah.
who just need encouragement and nurturing.
Yeah.
It's like a barrier to connection. So on the one hand, we're saying connect, then we're wearing the mask and they're finding that hard. So
Yes. Yeah, a
Any
friend of
advice
mine
on that?
who's a secondary teacher, you're mentioning that, she said that she has first years and she was wearing her mask, and she also has a screen behind her desk. She was wearing her mask, obviously, for the first few weeks, and one of the little first years came up to her and said, "Miss, we were wondering, will you step behind the screen and take off your mask, because we want to know what you look like." And it never dawned on her, because other students from second year up knew what she looked like, but these little first years did not know what she looked like, and had to summon up the courage to say, "We want to see your face." I thought that was very sad.
yes,
Summing
but
up.
there's ways around doing that.
Yeah.
There is.
Do they, people, I know it's a simple
Yeah.
thing. Are people putting smiles on their masks?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
could there be a situation where somebody
Yeah.
says from the back of the room or something within the
Yes.
distance, here's what I look like, guys,"
Exactly.
you know?
And
Yeah.
I think a
You
lot
know.
of teachers are actually going behind the screens
Yeah, and saying,
and,
"There
and,
is
and
that,
having,
there
and
is
having
that.
the social distancing and having the mask on if they're nearer to the children. I think that's what's happening in primary particularly, that they
Yeah.
are taking the mask off, because you have to have that connection.
But I really want to encourage the mask. Just,
Yeah.
I mean, from the point of view of my little public health experience or whatever, and the great voices of public health, the mask is going to be one of the ways we're going to get through this. And so I accept that. It's really hard to have a mask on all day. It's very hard in hospitals to have masks on. But the masks, there's a real good in the
Yeah.
mask. However, just in terms of the connection, emotional connection, there's a lot of data on what parts of our face connect with people. Okay, and it's interesting, So I mean, I've got crooked teeth and all that sort of stuff, and I worry about this sort of stuff. And yeah, I shouldn't share my worries here, but anyway, there you go. And I've learned with spectacles and others that the way people connect with you emotionally, visually, is out of the sound of your voice and where you cast your eyes. And so, just so you know, just practicing, and I spent 30 years doing this, practicing looking at someone and looking at them with your eyes, okay? Now, it's an extraordinary... Now, you're not masked up, but I'm just telling you, there's vast value in your gaze,
I
in
know.
your look.
It's incredibly how many people we've recognised from their eyes.
From their
the
eyes.
mask.
True.
And I said to someone that day,
Yeah.
you have amazing eyes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I never
Yes.
noticed.
Exactly.
So,
And the whole cultures
Perspective changes.
across the continents actually wear masks because we're very Eurocentric, but across
Yeah.
Asia people have
Well,
always
I
done.
I wish working with George Hook for 25 years, I wish he had worn a mask.
But you loved his eyes. You did. When George looked in your eyes, Brent, you felt better.
I melted, Jim, I melted, But here's one, dealing with sleep or lack of sleep. How can I calm myself when I'm anxious at night time all the time, thinking about the next day? Can't get to sleep. I know what this was all about because,
Yeah, it's
suffering
hard.
from insomnia and stuff, it's difficult.
And it's back to emotional regulation, and we were mentioning that we do, and I think that's something that's kind of under-taught in our schools, and I was very interested in doing it. That we need to learn how to regulate our emotions. The stresses are out, the stressors are out there, but we have to learn how to deal with the stress in our body. So, heightened states of anxiety obviously are going to be very detrimental. So if the anxiety comes and the worry comes, it should come, we should also be able to release it. And it's when we get stuck in it that it becomes a problem, that it becomes heightened. So whatever way you find to do that, that's self-awareness. Is it mindfulness?
I mean, just
Yeah.
tips, because I'm going through it myself. I mean, certain tips that, make the bedroom or the bed a safe place
Yes.
and a relaxing place to be.
Yeah.
And I'm sure teachers like me or whatever, they're up in their bed watching, doing the work for the next day with the computer screen. Wrong idea.
Yes.
Look forward to going up and having a bath or something, getting in to put the blanket on or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Turn the blue light off.
Yes.
You can
Yeah.
do so much more
There's so
for your
much.
sleep.
It's
Well,
true.
I call those things, Brent and Fiona, I call those the toolbox things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Toolbox.
what's in your
Yeah.
toolbox?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is sleep in your toolbox, or is it a problem?
Yeah.
Well, sleep is a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
You really
You need it
one
for mental health.
You mentioned some podcasts. I love
Yeah.
Foster's podcast. It's a very, very
Okay.
popular 10 minutes of TED Talk called Why We Sleep. And it's just, apart from being great stand-up, and he's a neuroscientist, it's fantastic sleep education. I really Foster, TED Talk, Foster, Professor Foster, Why We Sleep.
Yeah.
And it's 10 minutes of joy, but it's really solid neuroscience. And what I think we need to do is teach people, teach ourselves, learn ourselves some toolbox skills.
Yeah.
So you know them, but you've got to set not just a waking time, or not just a waking time, which we all do. I set the alarm time. You set a going to bed time.
Yeah.
You don't have a flat screen or a filing cabinet in your bedroom. You keep it slightly cooler than the rest of the house. There's some evidence that reading before you go to sleep is actually a cool
reading,
thing.
yes.
But you choose what you read, but you don't do flat screen. Okay?
I watch The Exorcist or something.
But the point is, and Foster says, sleep is a god.
Yeah.
Go worship it.
Yeah.
And so you start making sleep a thing that you're good at, like a skill.
Skill, it is a skill.
What do? I knit and I do good sleep.
Yeah.
But the point is, they're in your toolbox. And what I would say in terms of the people who say, well, what are the actions? Let's look into the toolbox. It's pretty bare now for all of us. And let's start filling it with good things. The walks, the connections.
Mindfulness.
They're the things
the
that
writing
challenge.
things down.
They're the positive interventions we can do. I used to, with children, I dealt with some children in the past who had sleep problems because they had anxiety, and we used to do a thing called a brain dump. So, just in the evening, not too near bedtime, they would just get a large piece of paper and write down all the things that were bothering them. So just kind of get all that out of your mind, and with markers, colours, whatever.
Lovely,
There's your brain dump. And, then if the thought comes up later, it's like, that's on my sheet of paper. I can go back to that tomorrow.
And that's like...
And it's just to reassure yourself, I don't need to sort that out now. I can sort that out tomorrow. I've done
That's like the gratitude diary, isn't it? And it's another great exercise.
Yes.
You can start saying, well, I'm going to start saying... Or one of the skills I'm finding helpful now with the people I'm seeing, and indeed myself, is I'm saying, how many negative things am I allowed to say today? Okay? It's a long day. As Victor Borg said, it's been a long day and I've been breathing for all of it. So, and I said, well, okay. How many? So I usually, people say, well, what do you mean? And then when you get the idea across, they say, well, I'll take 10. Okay, will 10 be enough? I say, yeah, no, I would.
Not for some people.
But you find by breakfast you've sent 5.
Yes.
You've only got 5 left.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, for every negative thing you say today, how many positives are you going to say?
Yes.
Trouble is that positives are only a ninth of the strength of a negative.
Yes, I thought that was so interesting when you mentioned that in your other talk, because I talk a lot about the positivity ratio as well.
Yeah.
And the negativity bias of our brains, that we're hardwired to be impacted by negative events, that we're drowning in negativity, and that the positivity buffers us. And I do say that to teachers. And there is research showing that teacher stress is predicted not by the presence of negativity, but by the absence of positivity. And I find that incredible.
It's a kind of a case of sort of fake
balancing
it till you make it.
Well,
balancing.
People will
balance ourselves.
They will get very. I would get very cross. I was told to fake it. But supposing I said, I'm going to try and fill my toolbox. Now I'm going to give you. Okay, I'll tell you what. I'll give you 15 negatives. If you want 15, you can have 15. But once you've used them up,
That's it.
Yes.
now
It's training, isn't it?
and then you discover actually these positive things I was saying. So that's a skill I like. We've talked about it before, Brent. I like Schwartz's 4 skills, 4 steps. You know the 4 steps. First one is to say, this is my pain. Okay? Just think of that word. It's my pain. Second step, my pain comes from my brain. It's not coming from COVID. My brain has got this tow truck and the snow plow in it, and it's got all that stuff, and I put it on the... It's my brain. I can have mastery over my brain. Third step, now I will refocus.
Yeah, refocus.
I'm going to
it's a
say,
big thing,
It's a huge thing.
Refocusing,
No, but hold a minute, there's all this strife and all this crisis. No, I don't need any of that.
Yeah.
I'm going to refocus.
Yes.
I am refocusing now. What am I refocusing on? I don't really care. If it's
Anything.
knitting, go do it.
Yeah.
Flowers, I don't... Rugby, it doesn't... The point is anything constructive that's positive for me.
And people need permission to do that, because I think a lot of people feel guilty when they refocus, because you know yourself, when you're thinking of the problems and the worries,
you think you're getting somewhere, you're ruminating, I'll think about that again, I'll spend a little bit more time thinking about that. And if someone tells you, don't think about that anymore, then you feel guilty.
You feel guilty.
I should be thinking about that. I should be thinking about that child. I should be thinking about that copy I didn't correct. In actual fact, no, you shouldn't.
So I usually
it's not doing you any good. Be focused.
People say, you're quite right, Fiona, people say about this thinking, but I've got to think about that. And I usually joke and say, well, you know, are you a great thinker? Okay? And people say, what do you mean? You know, well, name me a great thinker. Well, Leonardo, now he presumably was a great thinker. We can let him do lots of thinking, okay? But I'm not a great thinker. I don't need, actually, I can add nothing to this.
Yes.
My thoughts, actually, I don't, you know, I love when they say, we're following breaking news. Well, I'm not, Bud. I'm not following it. I actually, it does nothing for me.
So true.
I'm going to refocus on something. And
Take a bit of control.
Taking control.
Yeah.
Then the last of the 4 steps is I'm going to value my life.
Yeah.
And that means valuing now.
It's lovely.
That's
So I now value my role as teacher. I do value my role as a teacher. And I say, well, what is that going to look like? And how's it going to be?
Yeah.
And I hope it'll be better. But I value it.
Yes.
I don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I value it.
The other thing too, that having a life led with mental health difficulties, I think I say to people all the time, I didn't have a problem being physically fit, but I could never understand how I couldn't draw the line between being physically fit and mentally fit. And it's what I say to people, we understand that we need to go to the gym, or we need to go for a walk, exercise to build muscle or whatever. We don't understand that we've got to put the work in.
Yeah, it is work.
To our mentor, and it is work.
It's
and
true.
so many people come to me as they would to you and to you and say, you know, fix this now. And I have to say, but this is going to take small steps, and it's going to take a considerable amount of time if you're not prepared to put the work in.
Yeah.
If you're not prepared to sit up there overnight and write out your gratitude journal when you don't feel like
True.
it, if you're not prepared to, you know, what I
Mental
do
gym.
about the
Yeah.
negative thoughts, I think
Yeah.
I give you from 6 o'clock to 6:30 to come at me with everything you got. And I'll be there with my book
Yeah.
and I say, look, give me it. You know,
Yeah.
like you were saying about
To be
the
open to
pain
it,
list.
yeah.
Give me everything you got.
Yeah.
But leave it till 6:30. And after
Yeah.
6:30 I say, look,
Yeah.
and so there's ways of dealing with your toolbox or expanding your toolbox,
Yes.
but it requires work. And it's
Yeah.
not just going to magically happen because
Yes.
they listen to us or they say, oh, well,
Yeah, that's
okay,
true.
they've got to
It's
do
not
it.
a magic wand.
No, it's
Well,
not a magic
It's no
wand.
magic wand.
Really, our mental health is our greatest unmet need.
That's right.
And
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
the truth. And that's true in our health services. You know, before COVID, we spent 19 billion on the Irish health services, okay? 17 billion of it's state money, and less than 0.8 of 1 billion was mental health.
Yeah.
So we have a completely mismatch.
Huge.
But that's the same for us personally. But what about mental health, Jim? Where would that be? Where is it in our lives? Where's the time
Exactly.
for it?
I think self-awareness is where it has to
Exactly.
start. And you
Well,
have to
do all
think
these. How
what
do I-
actually
Exactly.
helps you. What helps me is not necessarily what helps you. So can
No.
I go home tonight and say, can I write down a list of 10 things that help me?
Yeah.
Is it watching
Yeah.
a certain thing on Netflix? Is it going for a walk for
Absolutely.
half an hour? Is it doing a little bit of mindfulness? And also, what doesn't help me? And write those down
No,
as
it's-
well. Staying up till 12 o'clock.
Exactly.
That doesn't help me, but I
doesn't-
still do it.
that
But
doesn't
I
help.
know then I shouldn't do it.
Yeah, and you do feel the
it's
pain after it. Next day you feel the pain.
Self-inflicted.
Well, it's also the thing that Jim said, and I say, you know, sometimes when I'm around talking around the country, and I was doing a talk there recently and to some very successful business people, and one woman kept underlining something that I was saying, and I said, by the way, just what are you underlining? She said, I need to enjoy things more.
Enjoy, have
And I
fun.
thought, if that's all
Yeah.
you've taken out from that,
Well,
great.
that's
enough,
great.
yeah.
Great.
But that is great,
Yes.
isn't it?
You know,
I mean, I
spend
think
time watching
one
that
of-
movie you want
Yeah.
to.
One of the things that good people are listening to us chatting away about look, let's be honest about, we're all passionate about wellness
Yeah.
and well-being. It is what makes us
Yeah.
get up in the morning. But people are out there not expecting to have to think about this.
No, that's the
and they're
thing.
trying really hard, and they're
Yes.
saying, why doesn't this just come naturally?
Exactly, that's the
And I
point.
suppose the truth of it is, we're saying, yeah, here's the adult piece. It doesn't come
No.
naturally. And in
Yeah.
fact,
And don't
we're
expect
probably-
it to
No,
either.
and don't expect
Well, that
it to.
adds
we're
an
probably
extra
made
layer.
to make it negative.
Yeah.
There's anthropological the
Yeah,
quotes.
but if
using-
you do a little bit of work each day,
Yes.
then you can change things
Yes.
around. And if it's
Yes.
going back tonight and writing
That's
out a
drop by
gratitude
drop.
journal, say, actually, I'm grateful.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for my house. I'm
Yeah.
grateful for my kids. I'm
Yeah.
grateful to have a job teaching.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward. These are all good things in my
Positives,
life.
yeah.
Not oh God, I might get the virus, or
Yeah,
those
yeah,
are things we can't control.
I actually say
you
to
know.
teachers, set your intention, not just for teachers, but that's who I work with.
yeah.
First thing in the morning, before you get out of bed, before the list
Yeah.
comes at you,
Yeah.
before the day comes at you, set your intention and pick your 3 non-negotiables. I love that idea. Pick 3 small things you're going to do for yourself that day.
Yeah.
And they're non-negotiable, so that no
That
matter what
leads into
comes
this. How do
at
we
you,
look out? How do we look
something
after
else
our own?
has to go off the list. So your walk at 4 o'clock has to be a non-negotiable. No matter what, or a parent rings, you say, no, I'm going to talk to them tomorrow.
That's
your 5 minutes of meditation.
Married at First Sight
Netflix.
is a non-negotiable. I have to watch that.
Star Trek is mine at the moment.
Star Trek.
I think so.
Yours the choir
It's-
singing and the knitting.
Well, exactly. It's what's
Yeah.
it that they say? You need a right ear, a left ear, and a final frontier. Isn't that? That's the.
Yeah.
I think those non-negotiables are really important. But
Yeah.
I want people to know that we are doing our best.
Yes.
Okay?
And that's enough. Self-compassion.
We are doing our best, and people shouldn't reproach themselves. But it is the case that we've got some way to go to develop a mental health culture in Ireland, one that is aware more than it was, but skilled. We're still short on that. And indeed, we've sort of, from the time, and you mentioned it in this word of sport and stuff, where we always think that this is macho to do, whereas actually it's really macho to do.
And being vulnerable.
And it's really
Allowing yourself.
It's really strong to do. And in fact, when we are under siege, this is what we have to learn to do.
Yeah.
And I think it's an opportunity to hope that we will become a different collective, a different type of school, a different type of home that has these skills. I'm hopeful.
But it's so hard to ask people. It's so hard to ask people out there in the culture now, look, how are you getting on or something? Oh, I'm grand or something like that when they're not feeling. We're geared up for negativity.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
geared
We're
up for
hardwired
negativity. And
to be aware of that is
Yes, and that
important,
and that comes from Neanderthal man or caveman
Yeah.
or
It is.
cavewoman.
It is. Well, or else, I mean, I didn't come not that far back, but I grew up in a culture where somebody said, praise the kid, he's great.
no.
No, he's a devil. You know what I mean?
No, well, that's it.
So it's not quite Neanderthal. It might be 60.
And we
60
looked at
years.
Americans and that especially and saying, oh, their kids can be astronauts. No, he's not going to be an astronaut. There's no way.
Yeah.
He can't be president of the US.
Well, exactly. We now know he can.
Cultural, isn't it?
But he
It's
maybe
cultural.
perhaps shouldn't. But the thing is,
Yeah.
it's a question of culture.
Yes.
And it eats strategy for breakfast in the famous old line. But I think we are at a time where people have been saying, the yellow posters, they're all over the country. Stay socially distant, wash your hands, wear a mask. I haven't seen one with an instruction about what to do about your mental health.
Yeah.
And we're pumping
Need
out,
that really,
and
don't
everybody's
we?
saying, oh, we got to be conscious of mental. But it's interesting. Whoever wrote those posters cannot articulate a single line that says, and wear your mental health. Okay? We haven't come up with a phrase.
No.
Yeah.
It's not on the posters.
Yeah.
Now, the truth of it is, the only thing that will get us through here is our mental health.
Yeah. True.
And it's the most important economic thing, it's the most important infectious thing, it's actually
But look, that's a
everything.
discussion
Yeah.
for another day because we were
Yeah.
just talking about it before you arrived here.
Yeah.
And I thought, I want to know who's advising the government, who's advising these people on mental health awareness because I don't see a lot of it. And it's even to the extent of what I see in the media is for a lot of people is now become kind of it's overplayed. They're not going to the TV anymore because they don't want the bad news anymore. They say,
We're
so many
drowning-
people are media
drowning
Drowning
Negativity.
it. And in fact, we need to have somehow a credible way of having breaking positive news.
Absolutely,
Yes.
breaking
Yes.
positive news.
How
And
do you do that?
I love the idea of, rather than saying stay positive, because that's not always a helpful thing.
No.
But I say stay open to positivity.
Stay open to
Stay
positive,
open, because
absolutely.
every day, particularly for teachers, has wonderful opportunities for positivity.
But what about the positive stories
We have
that are coming
to
out?
buffer ourselves in the classroom by allowing ourselves, because you know yourself, those negative emotions are stickier. Those positive events that happen, they're more fleeting. And just to give ourselves a little bit more time
Well,
to buffer ourselves in the classroom.
If you look at the trauma data, you'll see, as you know, that the huge traumas, the loss of a loved one, the break of the marriage, even moving the house, 85% of the population copes with those quite
true.
well.
Yeah.
And then you've got 15% of the population who make up most of the damage, who really suffer. And if you look at the people who suffer, they feel they blame themselves. And they often have, baggage in the trailer and a big snowplow in front of them. And what we need to do is to bring us all up so that we undo those burdens. But the truth of it is, human beings overcome trauma all the time. It's extraordinary.
We're more resilient than we think.
That we acknowledge.
We are.
But we do need to realize that where we're not, it's because of the pain list.
Yeah.
It's okay, the pain. I'm just conscious of time. Just something here that somebody's come in. Switching to Zoom for lectures and meetings, all our interpersonal interactions with staff and students have completely changed. It's draining and it's difficult to maintain relationships. Any advice on...
Yeah, well, I see that from my son, I suppose, who's in college and is on the computer, on Zoom, all day, every day, very, very draining. I just think we have to find creative ways to maintain relationships, to connect, to emotionally connect, some other way,
And again, maybe change that culture.
Change that
maybe
culture,
change the way we're doing things.
Yeah, I think that the practical science of it. For example, if we're talking now, we talked about eye movements and connecting with our eyes. There's a certain number of movements, of flickers of your eye, of your eyelids that you go. Once you are on a screen, it rises, and so one of the reasons we're tired is that our eyes are actually working 2 and 3 times faster and harder, and they're dry at the end of the day, and they've worked harder. So we're going to have to learn. We've had 2,000 years of one set of cultures, and now in 9 months we're all on Zoom. Every conversation starts with, "Can you turn your mute off?" You know what I mean? It's a whole new culture. Give it time. Give it time.
Yeah.
We're going to have to learn. It may turn out that we need to have breaks, that we have to have distanced meetings in some way. We're not going to go back to a time when Zoom didn't exist.
Yeah.
But we are going to learn a culture, I hope, that knows how to integrate it with the living and the working and the loving that is about us as human beings. That always was, and it's never going to change. We're going to get to be normal again.
Yeah.
But it will include new things, I think hopeful things. And I keep coming, you asked me to mention chime again, okay? Yeah. So that things that will work will chime. Yeah. A famous paper by a lady called Mary Leamy, and she worked in the Institute of Psychiatry not long ago in London. And she defined the things that were common to successful programs of recovery in the most difficult settings. They're connected.
Connect, that's the C.
And that's...
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I should have been a teacher.
Yeah.
They're hopeful.
Hopeful, yeah.
No plan without hope ever succeeds.
Have to have hope, yeah.
They have an identity. Who am I? Who are we? What are we together? What am I, my disability, or am I something that is collective, including my disability, or whatever?
Yeah.
I am. Include meaning. So the purposeful way forward, Fiona, includes the meaning of what we do.
And teaching.
And
has
teaching
so
that
much meaning.
There's so much meaning.
And for teachers to connect to that is important too.
But also my knitting has a lot of meaning. My other life has some meaning.
Yes.
And then empowerment. Once we get you talked about the levels, the management, the people involved at each different level. Each level needs to be empowered to speak to each other, to be powerful, to speak up, to speak out, and then to connect.
Communicate,
And so then you get around. And so those 5 letters, they're chime. Yeah. And we can make, as the poet said, hope and history rhyme. We can make health and recovery chime if we do it right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, we're kind of running out of time. So, first of all, thanks, Fiona and Jim, and also thanks to INTO and TUI for working with Cornmarket to facilitate the session. I think we could be here for another 2 hours or whatever.
Yeah.
I think, well, especially coming from you as a teacher, but coming from Jim and I, look, we really do appreciate that the schools are open and that we're educating young people about change.
And that comes a lot. That means a lot when teachers hear that it is appreciated and recognised.
It's valued,
and even from the parent community as well.
Absolutely, and they are
to hear that.
teachers out there take it from somebody outside that thing. You are really valued, and it is really important that education continues. But it is also a chance. I think to do today, it is a chance for you to be able to be at the forefront of a change in culture, a changing times, and it's how we embrace that, I think. That's the message out today. How you embrace that. Does it mean you've got to put the work in? Does it mean you've got to come up with your own toolbox? Absolutely. So these are all about change. We're not going to fix something for everybody out there. The number of questions coming in, flying in, we're not going to be able to fix that for everybody. But
And
what we can say
we're
is,
adapting. We have to
Yeah.
accept
We're all learning.
We're adapting.
learning and adapting and not being so hard on yourself. Have those pain lists and just say,
Yeah.
look, okay.
And I'm going back to that phrase, be militant. Please be militant about your own well-being, because nobody else is going to
Be
be.
militant
Gotta
about
stand
your
up
own
for-
well-being.
Stand up for
Look
your-
after
what
each
is-
other,
what
support
price
each
am I
other.
willing to
If it's
to
not
pay?
kind, it doesn't mind.
Yeah.
You've got it. It has to be
That's it.
kind.
Yeah.
We're going to finish on that. What is it? If
If it's not kind, it doesn't mind.
It doesn't mind. Okay. Thanks very much,
Thank
guys.
you.
That's fantastic.
That's great.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.